There is a map, not drawn on paper, not stored in any museum, not taught in any seminary in the Western world. It is a map of the soul, where it goes, what it passes through, what it must surrender before it can arrive. This map is ancient. It was written in a language older than Latin, older than Greek, preserved in a land that refused to let mystery be domesticated. And for most of your life, no one told you it existed. The Ethiopian Bible contains 81 books. The Western Bible contains 66. That difference is not a footnote.
The path to illumination begins with the flickering of 1,000 candles.
Inside those extra pages, inside the Book of Enoch, inside the Book of Jubilees, inside visions that Western councils quietly set aside, heaven is not what you were told. Heaven is not a destination. Heaven is not a reward waiting at the finish line. Heaven, according to the Ethiopian tradition, is structured, it is layered, it is alive, and it is terrifyingly close. 7 heavens, 7 stages. 7 movements of transformation that the soul must pass through, not after death alone, but beginning right now, in the middle of the ordinary life you are living. Most people spend their entire lives asking one question about heaven.
Tell me, where can I
Will
find
I make it there? The Ethiopian Bible asks a harder question. Where are you now? And how far are you willing to go? Here is what the Western imagination got wrong. We were told heaven is up, somewhere beyond the clouds, beyond the stars, beyond the reach of suffering and loss, a distant prize, a consolation after the long difficulty of being human. But in the highlands of Ethiopia, where clouds gather below your feet at dawn, the holy does not float overhead. It presses in from every direction. Heaven, in this tradition, is not above the world. Heaven is the world, finally healed. And that single shift changes everything. It changes how you pray. It changes how you grieve. It changes what you think God is actually doing right now. Not waiting for history to end, but actively drawing all of creation back toward its frequency. Because that is the word the Ethiopian mystics would use. Frequency. Creation is not broken beyond repair. Creation is out of tune. And heaven, all 7 layers of it, is the process by which God retunes what sin has warped. We are going to walk through all 7 heavens today, not as a lecture, not as a list. We are going to walk through them the way the ancient Ethiopian monks walked, as a living map. To understand why the Ethiopian Bible describes heaven differently, you have to understand what Ethiopia refused to do. In the 4th century, as Christianity spread across the known world, something else was spreading alongside it. Councils gathered, bishops debated, lists were drawn up. Which books were safe? Which visions were too wild? Which texts carried too much mystery to be preached safely? The result, over centuries, was a canon that grew cleaner, simpler, more manageable. 66 books, a number that came to feel permanent, inevitable, as if handed down, sealed, and complete. But that number was a decision, and not everyone made the same one. Ethiopia made a different choice, not because Ethiopian scholars were reckless, not because they failed to read carefully or think deeply, but because they applied a different standard. Instead of asking which books were safe enough to keep, they asked a harder question. Which books did the earliest believers treasure? And who gave anyone the right to take them away? The result is a canon of 81 books, and inside that larger canon lives a vision of heaven that the Western world quietly closed the door on and has been living in the smaller room ever since. Consider what was lost in that closing. The Book of Enoch is one of the oldest Jewish texts in existence. It is quoted directly in the New Testament. The Apostle Jude cites it by name. Early Christian communities across the ancient world knew it, read it, wrestled with it. And then, gradually, it disappeared from the Western canon, deemed too complex, too visionary, too difficult to control from a pulpit. Ethiopia never let it go. In the Book of Enoch, heaven is not a vague, luminous place where good people go to rest. Heaven is a structure, a living architecture of moral reality with layers and logic and weight. Enoch walks through its chambers, and what he sees are not clouds and harps. He sees angels on assignment, each one carrying a specific function in divine justice. He sees the dwelling places of souls arranged not by preference, but by the nature of what they loved. This is a cosmic courtroom,
the time for
not
mercy
a celestial
has passed,
resort, and that distinction matters
Judgment
more than
approaches.
you realize. If heaven is merely a reward, then the only question that matters is whether you qualified. But if heaven is a structure with layers and logic and weight, then the questions multiply urgently. What kind of person are you becoming in the choices you make in ordinary moments each day? Are you moving toward the center, or quietly drifting further away from it each day? The Book of Jubilees, also preserved in the Ethiopian canon, adds another dimension entirely.
Here, time itself is sacred, and history unfolds according to a divine calendar beneath everything. Heaven, in Jubilees, is not distant. It is the architecture beneath the world's unfolding story. When you read it, you feel that everything on earth is echoing somewhere beyond sight. Your life is not a series of disconnected moments. It is a movement inside a larger music. Now here is the question that Western Christianity rarely asks directly and honestly enough. What did we lose when we closed that canon and chose the smaller, safer room instead? Ethiopia sat with the mystery for centuries, through wars, famines, invasions, deeply rooted. Monks copied manuscripts by hand inside monasteries carved into solid mountain rock. Priests chanted in Ge'ez because the words themselves were too sacred to translate away. They were not being stubborn. They were being faithful to what they had received and kept. And the faith they preserved is larger than the one most of us were ever handed. Heaven is not a compensation for suffering. Heaven is the completion of what was always intended. A reality so vast and structured and near that the smallness of your old questions becomes embarrassing. Will I make it to heaven? Becomes too thin a question for everything the map contains. Am I being formed into the kind of soul that can bear what heaven actually is? That question is not comfortable. It was never meant to be comfortable for anyone. But it is the question the 81 books have been asking for 2,000 years without stopping. And now that the door is open, you absolutely cannot unhear what it has asked you. There is a word that appears again and again in Ethiopian theological writing with great insistence: a word that Western Christianity tends to rush past on its way to more comfortable conclusions. The word is
I cannot
restoration.
speak these words.
Not escape, not relocation,
They are wrong.
not the soul finally leaving the broken world. The world does not end in the Ethiopian imagination. The world heals completely and finally. And the healing begins not at some future moment. It begins the instant a soul turns toward truth. This is not a small theological adjustment. This is a complete reversal of the story most inherited. In the Western imagination, heaven became, over centuries, a place of departure and final leaving. You leave. The broken world stays behind. The soul ascends to somewhere clean and far away. It is a beautiful image. It is also, according to the Ethiopian tradition, profoundly incomplete, because it quietly teaches something that leads faith in the wrong direction entirely. That the world is the problem, that matter is lesser than spirit, that earth must be abandoned. And once you believe that, everything changes, but in the wrong direction, away from truth. Ethiopia looked at that theology and refused it, not loudly, but simply by continuing to read. God did not call creation good as a temporary sentiment. He called it good as permanent intention. The problem is not the world. The problem is our vision of it, warped and clouded by fear. Heaven, in this tradition, is not a different place. Heaven is this place, finally seen clearly. That single idea
friend.
carries consequences that most Western Christians have never been asked to sit with. If heaven is restoration, then judgment is not punishment. Judgment is simply diagnosis of truth. The moment of absolute clarity in which everything you have chosen to be is finally seen. Not a court that condemns, a light that reveals. And revelation always begins healing rather than ending hope. The Ethiopian texts speak of this with remarkable precision. God does not discard the wounded soul. God does not replace the broken. God restores, patiently, persistently, at a cost never minimized. It requires truth. And truth, when it finally arrives in full, is both beautiful and terrifying. This is where the Ethiopian vision parts ways most sharply with popular caricatures of heaven. Heaven is not comfortable by default. Heaven is not the place where everything is handed to you. Heaven is the place where everything false is finally, irreversibly burned away from the soul. And what remains is the you that God always saw beneath the layers of fear and pretense. That process is called healing, and healing always costs something real and significant from us. Think of what it means to have a wound properly treated, not covered, not ignored, not managed, actually treated, cleaned, reset, allowed to close correctly rather than just scarring over damage. It hurts. Sometimes it hurts more in the healing than it ever did in the original wounding. But on the other side of that pain is something the wound could never become on its own: wholeness. The Ethiopian Bible insists that this is what heaven is doing to every soul that enters. Not punishing, not rewarding in a transactional sense. Healing, making whole what was fractured. Salvation is not God rescuing you from a doomed world. That reading is fundamentally too small. Salvation is God refusing to surrender the world He made, beginning with the world inside you. Every act of genuine humility is a small healing, pressing heaven into ordinary earth right now. Every moment of honest confession, every choice to forgive, these are heaven pressing into earth. In the Ethiopian framework, they are moments of heaven pressing through the surface of every moment. And that is what this tradition means when it says that heaven is genuinely and completely near. If you have been carrying the image of heaven as a distant reward, I offer you a different image. Heaven is not the finish line. Heaven is the physician, and you are already in the waiting room.
The question is not whether healing is available. The question is whether you will be honest about the wound. If this vision of heaven as healing resonates with something you have carried quietly, write it below. Subscribe and stay with us. The map goes much deeper from exactly here.
We are in your presence. Bless this journey.
Every civilization that has ever existed has tried to answer the very same question across time. What happens to the soul when the body finally and completely stops its living? Most answers fall into two categories. The soul dissolves, or the soul simply arrives somewhere else. The Ethiopian tradition looks at both of those answers and says,
the truth
you are thinking too small
what
entirely.
is offered.
The soul does not dissolve, and the soul does not simply arrive. The soul travels with purpose. It moves through a structured reality designed not to sort souls, but to heal them completely. 7 heavens, 7 movements, 7 stages in the longest journey any soul will ever make. The names come from ancient Ethiopian manuscripts, from ZEALS texts the world has never read. They are not metaphors invented for comfort. They are descriptions reaching toward realities beyond language. Think of each heaven not as a separate place, but as a deeper layer of genuine seeing. The first heaven, SAKAI, the heaven of release, the place where the journey truly begins. Think for a moment about what the average human life quietly accumulates over many decades. Not achievements, not memories. Weight. The weight of guilt that was never fully resolved completely. The weight of shame that burrowed so deep it became part of the identity rather than separate. In SAKAI, that weight is named, not judged, named. There is a profound difference between them. Naming assigns truth and moves toward freedom. Judgment assigns blame and moves toward verdict only. The soul in SAKAI is shown exactly what it has been carrying. Every burden, every borrowed shame. And then, slowly, it begins to fall away from the soul. Not by force, but by naming. This is not yet joy. The Ethiopian texts are completely honest about what SAKAI actually feels like. Before heaven can fill you, it must first honestly show you what you have been carrying inside. The second heaven, CAYAMA. If SAKAI is release of weight, CAYAMA is the healing of wounds beneath.
Purify.
CAYAMA.
Purify.
The Ethiopian mystics speak of this stage with a word misunderstood across Western centuries. Fire. In CAYAMA, fire is not punishment. It is the symbol of love that burns away what cannot survive. Fire in CAYAMA is painful, but its purpose is not cruelty. It is surgery performed without malice. In CAYAMA, everything that clings to fear, resentment, pride, and deceit is brought fully into light. We do not lose ourselves in CAYAMA. We lose only what was never truly us to begin with. The most frightening thing about God is not his anger. It is his absolute refusal to lie to us.
The third heaven is called MALT, and this is where the Ethiopian tradition distinguishes itself most sharply. MALT is not the heaven where questions are finally silenced and all confusion resolves into one answer.
Patience.
MALT is the heaven where honest questions are finally taken seriously.
Who am I meant with true presence?
Think of every honest why
What am I
you
missing?
have ever carried.
Show me where to go.
Why suffering? Why silence?
Lead me to the
Why
truth.
this specific loss?
In many lives, these questions become heavy stones. We throw them at heaven or hide them in shame.
Oh,
In MALT, those questions are taken seriously. Not all are answered with words, but with presence. The soul is shown the larger tapestry, the way specific pain became the instrument of specific transformation. Not that the suffering was good in itself, but that it was not wasted in the hands of God. Tears are not mocked in MALT. They are gathered, treated as evidence of having loved something real. The wounds of the mind, confusion, disappointment, theological anger, begin at last to mend in MALT. Heaven in MALT is not the cancellation of thought. It is the complete and final healing of thought. The fourth heaven is Ban, and the map becomes almost impossible to describe without trembling here. Ban is the heaven of unveiled light. If MALT heals questions, Ban reveals reality itself completely. Light here does not simply illuminate. In Ban, light interprets. Everything blurred becomes finally sharp. Motives, choices, histories, relationships, all seen in Ban without distortion for the very first time. In Ban, truth is not an idea. Truth is environment. You breathe it and cannot escape it ever. You are seen completely by the one who knows you completely, and still you are not abandoned here. What burns in Ban is not hatred of the sinner.
It resonates
What burns
in the silence of the
is
heart.
hatred of the lie.
Listen closely.
God does not look at you in Ban with contempt. God looks with the complete unfiltered love of Creator. And in that seeing, total, honest, devastating, something extraordinary and unexpected begins to happen. You realize you are known completely, and you are not abandoned. That realization does not feel like relief at first. It feels like exposure. And then, slowly, it begins to feel like the thing you were always looking for. The first four heavens have prepared the soul for something it could not have survived at the start. The weight has been released. The wounds have been treated. The questions have been honored and held. The truth has been seen. Now in the next chapter, we climb into the final three heavens above, where individual restoration opens into something vast enough to include every star ever created. The map is not finished, and neither are you. The next three heavens are waiting just ahead now. There is a moment in the journey of the soul when healing is no longer the right word for what happens. Healing implies that something was damaged and is being repaired, and that is completely true so far. But somewhere between the fourth heaven and the fifth, something fundamental and irreversible shifts completely. The soul that has been receiving begins for the very first time to recognize what it was built to give. Not as obligation, not as performance, as nature. The way a bird opens wings and discovers air. The fifth heaven, MAYOS, the heaven of aligned will, and the one demanding the most honest self-examination. In MAYOS, the human will undergoes its final and most profound transformation, not its elimination at all.
Listen closely.
Not its elimination.
This truth
that must be
is
said clearly.
essential.
Surrender in MAYOS does not mean erasure of the self. What most of us experience as freedom is not freedom at all. It is a compass spinning without north. Sin disorders the will at the level of desire, making us want things that cannot possibly satisfy us. The disordered desire feels like genuine longing. The misdirected pursuit feels exactly like authentic freedom. In MAYOS, that disorder is finally resolved, not by force, but by the soul's own deepest recognition. The soul discovers that its deepest longings and God's desires are not enemies competing for dominance. They were always the same longing, looking for each other across the distance that sin had created.
Yes.
The soul in MAYOS does not feel conquered.
That's it.
The soul in MAYOS
That's
feels
my name.
recognized completely for the first time.
ማላጄነሽ ወስብሃት በሰማይ
Worship in
የምትኖር
MAYOS
አምላክ
is
ሆይ
not an
ጸጋህና
obligation
ቸርነትህ ላክልኝ።
fulfilled. It
ሰላምሽ
is a
እጅግ የብዙ ነው።
recognition
ወስብሃት
completed
በምድር
at the
የምትኖር
deepest
ወዛ
level.
አግኒሃ።
This is what I was made for. Not the shrinking of identity, but its absolute fulfillment in love. The frightening possibility, of course, is that we may resist this alignment long before we welcome it. God does not crush the will in MAYOS. He heals it until it can say yes completely and freely. The sixth heaven, ZEALS. And no single word in any human language is adequate to describe it fully. The Ethiopian mystics reached for the image of music, because music is the most accurate available description. In ZEALS, the universe itself is experienced as music, not as metaphor, but as the most literal description. Every star is a note. Every redeemed life is a voice in a composition too vast for any mind to grasp. Every act of genuine love ever performed in all of history is a sound in this unimaginable symphony. The Ethiopian liturgical tradition always understood worship as participation, not performance of empty duty. ZEALS is the awareness that everything everywhere is moving toward a single harmony inside God. Heaven in ZEALS is not silent clouds. Heaven is choir, not only of voices but of entire realities. ZEALS is the awareness of that eternal liturgy already in progress. Worship that never began and never ends. The sense that everything everywhere is moving has always been moving toward a single harmony in God. And then there is the seventh heaven, Aura. And no single word in any language is adequate here. Aura is not a place of distance. Aura is proximity. This is the heaven of breath and nearness, not distance, not looking at God from across an unbridgeable gulf. Proximity, the soul standing close. The soul standing so close to the source of its own existence that the boundary becomes the thinnest thing imaginable. Without
The
dissolving,
divine truth points
without the soul
upward to the
ceasing
heavens.
to be itself, this must be
human
held
truth-
clearly, without
The
confusion.
human truths on the heart.
The human person in Aura remains genuinely human, more themselves in fact than at any previous point. Genuine, active participation in the divine life, not symbolic but real and complete and irreversible. There is no bargaining in Aura. There is no performance. There is no carefully maintained self-presentation. There is only the soul completely known, completely loved, completely at home in the presence it was created for. Doctrine falls silent in Aura, not because doctrine was wrong, but because the territory has arrived. Every argument about God, every theological system, was a map. In Aura, you stand in the territory. The higher the heaven in this tradition, the more complete the self-giving, and the more whole the self. Greatness in Aura is measured not by power but by transparency to the grace surrounding everything. These seven heavens are not seven VIP
This is not
lounges
the way.
for the spiritually elite.
It is wrong.
Let that image go entirely. They are seven movements of healing, seven stages of growing nearer to unfiltered truth and love. The real terror, then, is not fire. The real terror is reality itself encountered without any disguise whatsoever. Yet for those who surrender to that reality, the terror turns to something far beyond ordinary joy. You do not have to die to begin this ascent. Even now, in this ordinary life, the journey is open. Every moment of genuine release is a taste of SAKAI, available to anyone willing to put the weight down. Every willingness to let God purify what is destroying you is a movement through CAYAMA right now. Every honest question brought into prayer is a step into MALT, and God receives every single one. The seven heavens are not only the future, they are the invitation pressing into every ordinary day. If this vision has unsettled something in you, if you are rethinking not just where you are going but who you are becoming, that unsettlement is the map working as designed. Share what is stirring in you. Write it in the comments, not as argument but as honest word. Subscribe and stay with us, because in the final chapter, the map comes all the way down to earth. There is a temptation at the end of a journey like this one to simply file everything neatly away, to organize what you have heard into categories, to sort the insights and assign them comfortable labels. The Ethiopian tradition anticipated this temptation entirely, and it has a response that is direct. You cannot think your way into heaven. You can only be transformed completely and entirely into it. That sentence is not mysticism for its own sake. It is the practical conclusion of everything the seven heavens describe. SAKAI, CAYAMA, MALT, BAN, MAYOS, ZEALS, Aura. None of these open in response to arguments won or knowledge accumulated. They open in response to surrender, to the slow, costly, daily decision to stop protecting what you are. And that decision, the Ethiopian tradition insists, begins here, in this life, in ordinary moments now.
O Lord,
while the Western
hear my
Church was
prayer,
debating the mechanics
and
of
let my
salvation,
cry
Ethiopia
come
was
unto
practicing what it
thee.
looks like from the inside.
No,
Not
it
perfectly.
is not perfect.
Ethiopia has
Nothing
its failures,
is,
its blind
but we
spots,
endure
its
with
moments
clear
of human
eyes.
weakness and
We
compromise. But at the level of spiritual formation, of what a person is actually shaped into by years of practice, the Ethiopian tradition has preserved something the arguing churches often completely and quietly lost. The understanding that salvation is not a transaction completed once, it is a transformation lived through daily. And transformation does not happen in a moment, though moments of decisive turning are genuinely real and necessary. Transformation happens in the accumulation of ordinary choices that seem too small to matter individually. Ordinary choices, ordinary disciplines, ordinary acts of surrender and attention and love taken daily together. The monks who copied Enoch by hand were not performing religious duty. They were practicing a way of being, a way of attending, a way of taking seriously the possibility that the words contain a reality larger than any mind. Reverence is not a feeling. Reverence is a posture, the decision to approach something as larger than yourself. When you encounter the seven heavens with reverence, not curiosity but living map, something shifts inside. You begin to notice the moments of SAKAI available to you right now, the burdens you were never meant to carry. You begin to recognize the CAYAMA moments, the ones that felt like loss but were actually purification working. The relationship that ended and forced you to confront something you had been successfully avoiding completely. The failure that stripped away the version of you that was built entirely on performance rather than truth. The illness, the grief, the professional humiliation that burned through the constructed self, revealing something real. The Ethiopian tradition does not romanticize suffering. It does not suggest pain is good in itself at all, but it insists, with the authority of people who have known suffering deeply, that no suffering is wasted. The fire of CAYAMA does not create the wound, it heals the wound that was already there before. You begin to bring
Does
your
the light
MALT
of grace
questions into
shine
the open,
here?
the ones hidden in silence because they felt too dangerous. Stop hiding your doubts from the one they are actually addressed to.
Do you see my path as
Bring
true?
them directly into prayer now. And you begin to practice BAN, the choice of truth over comfortable illusion in daily, ordinary decisions. The
No,
honest
that is not
word
it.
when
It is
flattery
this.
was available.
This is the path.
The acknowledgement of fault when denial was so much easier. Every such choice is a small movement toward the unveiled light, a crack through which something real shows. This is what the Ethiopian map of heaven has always been trying to say to the ordinary person living now. Heaven is not the exception to your life. Heaven is the destination your life is already moving toward. Whether you are cooperating with that movement or quietly resisting it in ways you have not yet examined. The seven heavens are not a theological concept for specialists. They are a description of what is happening now. The Ethiopian Bible preserved this vision because the people who guarded it understood one essential thing clearly.
I have
The
been
deepest
reading,
human questions are not
but now
answered by
I
more
receive.
information. They are answered by more formation instead.
You cannot receive aura as you currently are, not because God withholds it, but because transformation is required. The seven heavens exist because transformation requires stages, because love is patient enough to take the time. The extraordinary mercy embedded in that design is this: you do not have to wait until death to begin. The first heaven is already open. The release that SAKAI offers is available in this moment right now. To any soul willing to acknowledge what it has been carrying and ask sincerely for help setting it down. Not the moment of your
Welcome,
perfection,
friend.
the
Your
moment of your
willingness
willingness.
This is enough.
That is enough
Come
to
in.
begin the journey. We began with a map, not drawn on paper, not stored in any museum anywhere in the world, not taught in any seminary in the Western world. A map written in fire and ancient faithful fasting. 2,000 years of stubborn, costly, beautiful faithfulness by a people who refuse to let mystery be replaced. We have walked through all seven heavens now. SAKAI, where the weight finally and completely falls away. CAYAMA, where the fire heals rather than destroys. Surgery performed with love, not cruelty on the soul. MALT, where honest questions are honored rather than silenced, where tears are gathered, not dismissed forever. Bon, where truth is not an idea, but the atmosphere you breathe, and you discover you are not abandoned. MAYOS, where the compass finally settles and the spinning stops, while discovering it was made for alignment. ZEALS, where every redeemed life becomes a note in a symphony too vast for any single mind to hold. And Aura, the seventh, the closest, the one where proximity becomes the only word that finally remains. Seven movements, one journey, and a destination that was never a place, but always a condition of the soul. The condition of being so fully known, so completely healed, so entirely aligned with the one who made you. The Ethiopian Bible did not preserve these visions to win any theological argument with anyone, anywhere. It preserved them because a small vision of heaven produces a small and diminished life of faith always. And a large vision, a vision of seven layered movements of healing, produces something entirely different. It produces people who fast not to earn anything, but to practice the freedom from appetite that heaven makes permanent. People who share food with strangers, not as charity, but as liturgy, as declaration that Aura is already here. People who live as if heaven is already pressing in, because they believe with full weight that it is. And now, the map is in your hands. Not as information to be filed, but as living invitation to be entered.
Open it.
The question
now.
was never only, will I make it to
is
heaven?
Everything you
The question has always been, will I
May
let
it
heaven
guide you.
make me?
I am ready.
If you are still here, then something in this journey has refused to let you go. And that is enough. The map was always open. You just needed someone to show you the door into what was already there. Share your thoughts below, not as theological argument, but as honest word from wherever you are today.
Like this video if it opened something in you. Share it with someone ready to ask harder questions now.
Subscribe and stay with us. There are more doors ahead that the Ethiopian tradition has kept carefully open. More visions that insist the universe is larger and God is nearer than any of us has yet dared to believe. The story is not finished. Not for the world, not for the church, and not for you reading this now. The God who designed 7 heavens is still writing the chapter that has your specific name on it. Always. The map was always open. You just needed someone to show you the door. The mystery deepens and continues.